Yeah, it's recording.
Okay.
The angle's good.
Black is good. Blue.
I like it.
I appreciate your ability to write upside down.
Do we want to start by talking about sex? Let's talk about sex, baby. All the sex everywhere.
All the sex everywhere. So we talk about it a couple of different ways. Talk about it like bodies and chromosomes and things like that.
People can have XX chromosome and present totally male, or they could have XY chromosomes and
Even these
like
confuse
body-wise.
me.
Yeah.
All the X's and Y's and Y's and Z's, and I would like to make my own chromosome. I would like an XYZ, thank you.
It's not like we come out of the womb and they test our chromosomes, right? Intersex is like something, is like 1%. But we don't know what our chromosomes are. Like, you know, like so many people could be expressing XYX, XXY, you know,
And
like,
1%
or
is a lot.
It's also important to note that like intersex, there's so many different intersex
Yes.
groups. And like there's more being labeled every day.
Every day.
and being labeled is a really important
Yeah.
thing to say. It's like people just need to keep putting things
Labels on these.
labels.
Let's make you a new intersex.
Yeah.
You're a new kind of intersex.
Yeah.
Genitals are a part of sex as well, and
Yeah.
so there's like penises and vaginas, vulvas,
Uteruses.
and all different kinds of combinations possible too for people who are intersex. And so it's like even genitals aren't so binary as just male, female, or
And they all come
penis,
in different
vagina.
shapes and sizes.
And combinations.
They actually full on addressed the question about if I would ever get a penis, and I don't think that a penis fully makes a man. And when they said this, I was like, no, but wouldn't it be great if I could have a penis and a vagina? I just think, you know, why does one make one and one make the other? Like, it just, that doesn't make sense to me.
What are examples of hormones?
Testosterone.
And then
Estrogen.
progesterone.
Oh. So I'm still also very confused even about this stuff after 12 years of exploring.
Yeah.
So would in here go androgens?
Testosterone is an androgen.
Yeah.
Okay.
Androgen's like a category.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, see, here, there's these things that I still, even when I explore and look for things, don't understand most of it.
And then all those lead to secondary sex characteristics like voice changing and breast development and
Body hair.
anything that happens in puberty basically.
Wherever your puberty may happen.
Yeah.
Or when.
Yeah, I think
Over and
that's
over again.
I think that's such a cool part about sex is that everybody's sex is different and changes in your lifetime.
The fact that our genitals start out basically a non-gendered body. Babies start out non-gendered.
We need to be having these conversations and people need to understand the complexity of sex and be okay and be comfortable with it.
I mean, it just shows how this is humans trying to make sense of something that is more complicated. And we keep trying to be like, we figured it out, we can put it in a box.
Yeah.
It's that box right here.
Yeah.
And then it's like, oh, but there's this variation and this variation. And sometimes we just want to pretend let's just not, we don't want to listen to that. Because we like things that makes us feel safe. That we can go, this is here, but in the reality, nature does not allow that. If it happens, it's natural.
Nice. Where does sex go?
Around the whole body.
Especially if you're talking about secondary sex characteristics. Where
Right.
they're like here.
Oh, it's everywhere.
all over here, and then on your beard. or
And your
not
armpit.
here.
Same with the hormones. They're in the blood, they're in the brain, they're in the,
The
they're
thyroid
everywhere.
and
Yeah.
they're in the gonads, and they're in
Right? So maybe we should
Can we just color in the genderbread?
Should we do that? It got a little messier than I was thinking, but
Sex can be messy.
But that is how it is, right? It's not so cut and dry.
What does gender mean?
And that's I pretty much summed it up right there. Yeah.
Well, I think we all get taught what gender is in terms of like, this is what makes a man or this is what makes a woman. But then if ever we were to go around a circle of a room full of anybody and we asked people to really talk about their gender and what makes their gender, everybody would have a different answer.
So gender would be socially constructed.
Yeah.
I
Something
like that.
that we have as different cultures and different beings created and formed.
Just in general, experience informs how you understand what gender means.
Up until, in my mind, 20 years ago, there was two. So it was easy. It was like, yeah, sex, gender, one and the same. There seemed to be kind of this understanding, this nice label, this nice box, everything fit. And then we started to look at that, and because we started to look at it and open those boxes up, we started to see that things just weren't quite fitting right.
We use gender to kind of make up for the fact, like, hey, we have this fractured view of bodies, and we kind of use this idea of gender being something fluid to make up for the fact that, like, our view of sex is so mosaic almost, when it really should be more continuous and fluid.
Because if you don't have the experience in having to separate your sex and gender, you could just not know what you're feeling is like a thing about gender.
And if we had a more fluid representation of what sex is, would that change the way that we need gender concepts?
I think the reason that gender is useful as a separate concept is because your sex, or your body, might be shaped one way or another. You might want to express something that doesn't line up with that, and that's where I think gender isn't about necessarily bodies or behaviors or whatever, but like expression and like choices.
I don't feel like it's something newer. It was not talked about. It didn't have the language around it that it does today.
Yeah.
So not that it wasn't there.
I think it also came up with the Industrial Revolution too, and the rise in commercialization, because you can market more things if they're towards different groups. Designate these groups and we can have a pink thing and a blue thing, which was not always pink girl, blue boy.
And it connects to colonialism for sure, in the imposition of what gender is or means, or roles that women or men are supposed to play. That was used as violence against Indigenous people whose expressions of gender or roles of gender didn't fit well into these models.
There was also a lot of racism and racial stereotypes that went into this is what a man is, and then there's the subsets of men.
The language that we use in kind of a positive way to talk about this stuff of deconstructing gender and deconstructing sex, the way that we use our language to talk about it is very specific to our time and place. It does become problematic to a certain extent to start applying concepts of gender to the past or to other locations, even when we are talking about it like we're talking about it right now in kind of positive light.
And I think sometimes with language, as soon as there's a word for something, we want it so bad that we'll grab onto it, but then the sort of cloudy, unworded images and possibilities get kind of funneled through those words. It's important to leave space for things, for imagining beyond that language that we have.
I always kind of wanted to know, what does it look like if you don't have the language? Do these things exist?
Oh my gosh, I think about that with French all the time. And I do believe that people have all these different ways of understanding gender, but the language in French is so gendered that I'm like, how does language affect how we identify? I think it's so interesting.
We want to start using they as a third person singular pronoun started not from a gender space. When we don't know the gender of somebody, we need a placeholder. Informally, it's been being used since the 1600s, and starting in about halfway through the 1800s, there was a want to formalize that.
And so this idea, again, of gendering, of even pronouns and things like that, that's a cultural thing, very much so.
And then there's other languages that are working really hard and have neutral pronouns already built into their languages, like German and Swedish.
When I was learning ASL, when you're talking about someone, it's very much where you're placed, whether it's male or female, and there's no in between. That people are working towards it, but there's no officially recognized sign for genderqueer or anyone who uses neutral pronouns.
Identifying as genderqueer or using gender neutral pronouns is also connected to being able to go to university.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that's changing through things like Tumblr and online communities.
I'm much more comfortable in the idea of gender not being around. From day to day, I don't know, and so to me, the only thing that makes me think about it is when I'm I'm doing something manly, right? But that's been, somebody said, this is a manly thing.
Why I sort of identify the way that I do and dress the way that I do, I think it's because of, my own safety and my own feelings of how to embody so that people understand a little bit more about me or allow me to be me, in opposition to these forces sometimes coming from the outside. Because I feel like gender is also one of those things, like sex, that gets put on you when you you
Yeah.
walk out the door. Like people are like, here's your gender, here's your gender.
Which for me is what's so hard on a day-to-day basis to know, like, am I doing this so that maybe, just maybe, the world will see me for who I am, my expression, or am I really doing it for me?
Where does gender go on the person?
I was in a school once and somebody described it as your spirit. So in your heart, but it's also your soul. I feel it one place and I think about it in another place.
And of course, I keep going back to it being socially constructed, so I mean, it exists nowhere and exists everywhere.
Oh, sexual orientation.
It's like sexual feeling.
The general gender of person you have sexy feelings for.
Then we also get into like sexual orientation towards not necessarily gender, but like a certain kind of interest
Or politics.
or even body.
And I think a lot of times sexual orientation always refers to X attracted to Y. If we've decided that both X and Y as categories don't necessarily make sense, then how do we talk about orientation?
When I came back out, it was such a political thing. I was in dating a hetero, cisgender, this kind of relationship, but I was like, no, I am not just that. I wanted to be visible so other people that felt they couldn't be visible could be.
You step into boxes to claim an identity, to ask for rights.
As a queer person, I feel like community because of my sexual orientation.
Yeah.
You also talk about identity being everything that you're not.
That's important specifically in situations where there's power that you have to appeal to as a collective group or like as a community that's bound together. When we identify communities as one thing or another.
And there's like a culture that forms around that and resistance that forms around that.
It really is based along gender lines, and
Yeah.
as far as like societal perception goes. It's not like if you're attracted to bigger bodies, you have a different sexual orientation than somebody who's attracted to smaller bodies. If you're attracted to specifically male bodies or specifically female bodies, that becomes a sexual orientation.
I just am one of those people that I just assume everybody is gay or like there's some sort of sexual fluidity and that we're all kind of queer and that you just haven't been exposed to that particular person yet. So people are like, no, I'm pretty sure I'm straight. I'm like, yeah.
Sure.
You might
okay. Sexual orientation is also dictated by like societal pressure. It's really hard to get excited about someone if you're afraid.
Language we use with sex, like being attracted to male folks or female folks, and then
Yeah.
men and women is language we use with gender. Sexual attraction is connected for everybody a bit to this like assumption. I'm reading your gender.
Yeah.
And I may be making assumptions about your sex.
Where does that go? On the body.
Another line.
What you feel in your pants.
Big in the
A
head.
lot of stories.
And sexual experience isn't always in your pants or in your crotch or if you don't wear pants. Different people feel it different ways and different spots or maybe not at all.
Romantic orientation.
It's the type of people you have lovely feels for.
Have some kind of a connection to.
Separating sexual attraction and romantic attraction is cool because sometimes you might have sexy feelings for someone but not romantic feelings, and sometimes you might have romantic feelings but not sexy feelings.
A lot of people just don't have sexual attraction towards people but really do want that romantic connection.
So there's asexual and then there's also aromantic.
Like this, where's this language coming from?
Discussions of including like asexuality in communities and being able to talk about that as like a real and valid thing.
For me, I learned it from younger people.
How would that fall into, say, polyamory, monogamy?
When I sort of got into poly, recognizing how my sexual attraction is only usually ever one person, but I have a lot of really romantic friendships and really intense emotional bonds. Like they need their time and their space, and they need to be recognized as important relationships.
We're talking very Western culture
Yeah.
as well, because in other places and within other cultures, the ways that men can show affection towards one another is really different than here.
Even just like people in general will still being friends. Like two girls kissing here, but two girls kissing in somewhere else. Like automatically here would be lesbians, and then somewhere else could be like, that's just saying goodbye.
Male interactions dominated by homophobia being a relatively new phenomenon.
So then it does connect to gender because of the constraints of masculinity and how masculinity stops people from being able to express like romance or things that are seen as feminine.
Romantic orientation, where does it go?
Would it be in a heart? Like, I mean, in the sense of
Like
symbolic.
of emotional core. In our bellies and our hearts.
Put a butterfly in the belly.
Genderbread
Deconstructed.
Yeah.
We didn't start
We started with like, it was like it's